Welcome to the Butter Notes podcast with three guys who have no business listening to music, much less talking about it. All right, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Butter Notes podcast. We're here for Raw Beef number 12 today, and Jake and I just finished editing a whole big slew of episodes of this, so...
And uploading them.
I'm trying to be mindful of potential corrections, given all of the labor hours that it took to get that.
We're gonna play it
correct.
super safe today. Nobody's allowed to make any jokes, and we have to raise our hands when we want to talk. That's how we're doing this going forward.
This is Tone speaking, and I'm
hired...
going to say a lot of dumb shit that these fools are going to have to cut out.
We just mute your tracks entirely, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
you say whatever you
you've
want.
never appeared on a single episode of the Butter Notes podcast.
Yeah,
there's long bouts of silence where we're in between me and Jake talking.
Interesting. So it's kind of avant-garde.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's even worse. So it's actually even worse than it would be if we didn't mute you. Believe it or not.
Yeah, I believe it.
It's still horrible. It's still horrible.
Your desire to mute me is so intense that you're willing to make it worse just to get me out of it.
Make it better. That's the
exactly
point.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Jake described this crop of albums the other day. How did you describe it, Jake? If you want to give us your metaphor there.
An Eye of a Hurricane. I said that my album is the Eye of the Hurricane.
Yes, so, which it happens to be the middle album today. And the way I thought of it earlier was more like delicious, fresh, smoked turkey in between two pieces of very moldy bread.
That's a really good one, too. That's way funny.
So, with that in mind, why don't we dive in here? We've got, how do you pronounce this? Anaal Nathrakh,
No.
Is that right?
Anaal Nathrakh, yep.
No, it's Anal Nathrakh.
Anal Nathrakh. Yeah,
Anaal Nathrakh is it's like Celtic for serpent's kiss. It's a pretty badass metal band name, honestly.
That's super badass.
It's like so badass that they even that they chose it despite the fact that it basically says anal.
So what's happening on this album cover? The album is the Codex Necro, by the way, which is their debut. From 2000.
It's just a dude getting suffocated. He has a bag on his head, and it's either hands or like some kind of strap around his neck. And he does not appear to want to be suffocated. No, he's trying to pry that which is suffocating him away from his neck. He's not having a good time, and he's covered in barbed wire. It's an album cover that fits the music.
It looks like gigantic cockroaches are suffocating him too. Some Lovecraftian horror in the background.
So is that the sound that is like? Are we hearing the guy on the cover in the beginning of track 2, When Humanity is Cancer?
Oh yeah, there are a lot of good samples on here. Like what's that guy saying at the beginning of When Humanity is Cancer? Like take it back, go back. Like what's he like? I can't really understand it, which I kind of like that I can't understand it.
I don't know. All I heard was incoherent screaming.
Yeah, maybe like Dave Hunt, the vocalist. So Anaal Nathrakh, 2-piece, long running. They have like 14 albums. Really respected band. A 2-piece. Dave Hunt on vocals, and then Mick Kenny, who does all the instrumentation. So it's just two dudes. There were some guests on some of the albums, but not on this one. This one is all just the two of them. And Dave Hunt, insane vocalist. I feel like if you imagine what like it sounds like in your head if you're getting strangled like on this cover, like what does that sound like in your head? It sounds like Dave Hunt's vocal performance on this album.
I imagine Dave Hunt's vocal performance as the person who's strangling me and the thing I need to get away from.
Yeah. And like I listen to a ton of extreme metal and have since I was like very young, so is Jim. And Jake's listened to a ton of it too, not for as long as us, but still he's listened to a ton of it. Like when I first listened to the Codex Necro, when Dave Hunt's vocals start about 30 seconds in, I was like, holy shit, this is intense as fuck. Like I've heard like every kind of like harsh singer under the sun, and then I was like, it's honestly it's unbelievable. It's like one of my favorite vocal performances on an extreme metal record. Dave Hunt's a madman. He does a lot of cleans actually in the later parts of the discography, which is hard to believe listening to the early stuff.
I heard that actually a song came on like the Spotify radio after the album finished, and they were singing, and it was kind of jarring actually.
Yeah, good God.
Neither of you.
It's just relentless.
Had you guys heard? Yeah, that's the description of this album is relentless. It's one of the most brutal things I've ever heard. And, like, obviously you could, I don't know, like, we meme a lot about gore noise. Like, that shit, I guess, is technically brutal, but it's just fucking noise. Like, the Codex Necro is, like, it's actually structured songs and well-written riffs and everything, but it's just, like, insanely fucking brutal.
This is coherent, and that's what I was going to ask. So I see the genre tags as black metal, grindcore. I got the impression that this was a kind of fusion of different extreme metal styles. Like, it wasn't limited to just one kind of... Because when you said I've got a grindcore record, I was like, oh, okay, we're doing a meme this week or something like that. And it was much more intelligible and coherent what was coming out of through my headphones. I obviously hear some of the black metal with some of like the tremolo picking, but then there's like the really like distorted kind of thrashy death metal parts as well. It seemed to me to be kind of a fusing of different styles of extreme metal.
Yeah, and the industrial element's really there too. Like, it's programmed drums, which when bands try to do programmed drums and like try to make them sound like real drums, that normally sounds like shit. But like, there's an electronic, industrial component to an Nathrakh sound, and the programmed drums like add to that. So it's like being used in an artful way, not just like as a substitute for a actual drum kit. And speaking of some of those tremolo BM riffs that are on here, like I sung Dave Hunt's praises, but Mick Kenny, he pulls out some insane riffs on here, like that main riff in When Humanity is Cancer, like what a fucking riff, and Submission is for the Weak. Like this thing, like I'm just pumped the whole time I'm listening to this thing. It's like, it's brutal and it's draining and it's horrifying, but it also is just like, it's just a fucking badass record. It's just like a balls to the wall,
yeah, it is
brutal
badass
metal record.
It doesn't let up at any point. I don't think there might be some moments of reprieve, but they're very slim on this record.
Yeah, so I was thinking too when I first put this on, I was like, oh, like all the memeing we do about gore noise, now it's coming to fruition. We're gonna get just a touch of noise in one of these Raw Beef episodes, because this shit is harsh, man. It's really harsh. It's really noisy in terms of the production, and I like it. It needs to be that way for music like this.
Yeah, it's not like some like raw black metal is harsh in a different way. Like if you listen to like, I don't know, like Transylvanian Hunger, which is like the classic raw black metal album, like it's like it's recorded in a way that makes it like kind of sound like it's kind of like distant from the speakers because it's so lo-fi. So that like almost in some ways that almost sort of like eases up on the brutality a little bit, just because like it's so fuzzy. But this is in your face, like every second. Like you feel like the album is like being played right next to you the whole time.
It sounds like they're almost like intentionally clipping all the mics, like just like so it's breaking up just a little bit, like you're getting a little bit more distortion like in the front end. Do you remember the scene in Metalocalypse where the producer Dick Nubler is hearing Mermaider for the first time, and he gets like literally blown back by the speakers, and his hair is like flying back? That's how I felt when I listened to this. It's just absolutely relentless.
So I wasn't really sure if Jake would like this one. I thought he might hate it, honestly. I was making fun of him a little bit, saying he'd get filtered by it, but honestly, I wasn't. I was like 50-50 as to whether or not Jake would like this. But I think he liked it a lot. I think he actually liked it more than Jim based on the ratings. So
I gave it a 4.5. Well, Jim doesn't do the.
I don't believe in 4.5.
Yeah, that's anyway. No, I it's crazy. No, it hit all the right spots. I mean, I think maybe some of that comes from when we have this old, for all our listeners out there, we have this old, not even archival release because it's dead, I think, but we did an old like death metal, like 90s death metal starter pack or something, and it just like didn't resonate with me. I didn't really listen to it. I guess I had a lot of baggage.
That is the second thing we ever recorded.
Yeah, I think so.
With Tone.
But then I went back and listened to like I know this is much like a little more progressive on the progressive side, but Symbolic by Death, and then was Unquestionable Presence by Atheist. I listened to both those albums, and then I listened to the first Cannibal Corpse record, which is more of like really, I guess, pretty obvious, like Eaten Back to Life, right? It's like pretty
Fucking
obviously
love Eaten Back to Life.
influenced by thrash metal. It's thrash metal with like heavy distortion and Cookie Monster vocals, basically.
Slower than thrash metal too.
No, I think it just took me a little while to warm to stuff like this. But even on this one, I think the vocal performance, like you're saying, Anthony, set it apart. It's really interesting. I mean, there's a couple of extreme metal vocalists, like Corpse Grinder is like a world class like extreme metal vocalist, and another one I can think of. And I guess for me, that's kind of what sets it apart. A lot of times when I'm listening to death metal, it kind of, I don't know, the vocal parts kind of don't ruin it for me, but it kind of melds together. But I thought this album was really unique, and like I said, it had all those kind of fusions with like the tremolo stuff and the, I don't know, that's really like distorted like guitar riffs with the blast beats and stuff. I thought it was really interesting. It's really technical. I like that sort of thing. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this.
Yeah, people don't really describe Nathrakh as like avant-garde metal, and they're not 100%. But I think like the song structures and what you're hearing on here is not like typical of even like a typical black metal record. It's not like progressive necessarily, and it's not like avant-garde in the way that Imperial, Triumphant, or like Deathspell Omega or that kind of shit is avant-garde. But it's pretty weird. Like, it's definitely not starter pack metal by any means. Like, not even starter pack extreme metal. I keep picking these like very difficult extreme metal records for this series to make Jake listen to, but he's warming up to it, which I appreciate.
I had a better time with this than Involved, just because I liked Involved. It was just really long, and so I just wasn't ready for it at that time. But
I love that album.
This is this is a much more tractable record. Like I need it in smaller doses to warm up to it, and sometimes with extreme metal, like I like when it lasts about 30 minutes. Like that's the sweet spot. Like that's what I needed. This is a little longer than that.
Nathrakh is not atmospheric or ambient at all, for sure.
Exactly, and the lyrics aren't the lyrics aren't either. The lyrics are more like something you'd find on an aborted record. Like they're gross and brutal.
Yeah,
like they're not like introspective and spacey at all. Yeah. They're just really brutal.
Yeah, and Dave Hunt doesn't publish his lyrics, which is interesting. You can pick them out a couple times on the album, but you can't
the
find
song
the
titles
lyrics.
give you some hints.
They do, yeah. Human, all too fucking human. Basically just like extreme rage and hate from start to finish. The Techno Goat is another track I wanted to highlight. Might be the most impressive vocal performance on here. There are like these howls on the Techno Goat.
Oh,
howls are like the only thing I can really use to describe it. It's like, I don't know, he's like yelping at like this insanely high pitched tone. It like almost sounds like a synth or something, but it's definitely the vocals. It's it makes it. It's blood curdling, honestly. Those howls on the Techno Goat.
It's mean fucking music.
Yeah, it is. Mean is a good word.
Had you guys ever heard of Anaal Nathrakh?
No.
Nope.
Never? I'm surprised
never.
that we never stumbled across them like in high school when we were into extreme metal.
I kind of am too. When did you find this?
I found this pretty recently. I've been listening to a ton, discovering and listening to a ton of BM over the past like year or two, and so this was a recent discovery. Yeah, a lot of people debate on they're kind of like, it's normally among the catalog, it's either this one or their fourth one, which is Hell is Empty and All the Devils Are Here, which is probably my second favorite, and then their like sixth or seventh one in the Constellation of the Black Widow. It's usually one of those three that fans choose as one of their favorites. The second one is also amazing. I'm not as big of a fan of like the kind of more symphonic approach that they take on some of the later albums. I still like it, but like the whole first half of the catalog is like insanely solid extreme music.
There are glimmers of that symphonic element in Codex Necro as well. There are moments where you can kind of see that coming.
I agree. Yeah, for sure.
Like especially on the latter half of the album, I remember noticing that.
And there are a lot of samples too, which adds to the industrial component, but also kind of the there are like these kind of like cinematic moments of sampling that sort of add to the symphonic vibe a little bit.
Well, now that we've died a brutal death by suffocation, let's move on to Jake's pick for the week. Destrier, is that how you pronounce that?
Destrier, yeah, by Agent Fresco.
Yeah, Destrier by Agent Fresco.
2015.
2015.
Yeah, this is an album I've mentioned at least in one other episode. I believe I mentioned it when we did the 2010s prog metal starter pack. And I guess just to get this out of the way, like right off the bat, I found this record through listening to Leprous, and I think that anyone who listens to this and knows about Leprous will obviously make a connection between the two. I think it's mostly having to do with the vocal performance. They sound like a spitting image of one another on this record. But I think Agent Fresco is pretty unique, independent from what Leprous is doing in a lot of ways. For one, this is much brighter. They use pretty standard kind of pop song formats, and it's not as repetitive as Leprous. And I don't mean that in a good or bad way. It's just I don't think it's as repetitive and kind of like rhythmically driving. But this is an album I kind of found. I can't remember. It may have found me, honestly. There was a lot of hype for this record when it came out in 2015 for people who like, you know, Leprous, Haken, Periphery. It was like it was on that kind of radar if you were listening to that stuff around that time. And yeah, man, this album, I've probably listened to it 100 times. I think, as far as I understand it, it's a concept record in like the sense of it, not that there's a unified story moving throughout the record, but it seems like every song deals with the same sort of kind of conceptual or thematic elements. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. What do you guys think about this?
I thought this thing was absolutely phenomenal. It definitely laid my ass on the ground. It floored me for sure.
Like, I knew Anthony would like it.
This thing was amazing. Yeah. The vocals were absolutely incredible. There were even instrumental moments that like totally were insane. Like technical polyrhythms, but done in a tasteful way, and it didn't seem shoehorned in. Like super emotional, just like an amazing melodic, like proggy alt rock record. Kind of like one of the best I've heard in the style, honestly. And I love this kind of stuff, you know, going back to, I always kind of say that Code and Cambria were kind of the genesis of this kind of music, because I think they were. And I love that shit. So, yeah, this was amazing. I loved this one.
I figured Anthony would like it. I think James liked it too.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony just basically said what I would have said about it. That's a great way to describe it. I was just going to say, I mean, like, you kind of can't help but, like, I couldn't help but think of Leprous when I heard this. It's just, like, the vocal styles are so similar.
Insanely similar.
But, yeah, super, super similar. But there are obvious differences. Like, you know, Leprous has, like, I think a more, like, layered texture to him compared to this. Like, this stuff is more tangible. Like, there's still an atmospheric element to this stuff, but it's not so much of a wall of sound as you get with Leprous. Not tons and tons and tons of production.
I think that has to do with the math rock influence. Those kind of like angular melodies in the guitar, and like it's not as distorted. I see this get lumped into the gent genre, if we're calling that a genre.
I didn't,
which I understand it.
This album.
I understand it to the extent that I disagree with the classification for what it's worth, but I understand why people do that. One, like, I mean, the Leprous comparisons there, I don't think that's enough to do it, but I can see where people would go from that to that. But it's the use of the, like, really punchy rhythmic guitar with, like, syncopated rhythms that I think people, I don't know, gravitate toward, and that's what kind of leads them to classify as gent. But if you watch live performances of this, they're not palm muting the guitar at all. Like, it doesn't happen. They're just actually using a fair bit of distortion on the guitar. They're not. I think he's using a 6 string in this, So, but I think it's just it's like that first riff in Dark Water that starts off, or like the one in like Sea Hell, like when that kind of rhythm that drives throughout the song.
I mean,
But-
I guess, but there's really no metal at all on here.
Yeah, I totally agree. I can't believe anybody would call it that. Really.
I also think this is
that's
a
been
lot
common
better than
observation.
most. I also think this is like a lot better than most bands that are called Gin.
I mean,
so.
I guess there's like polyrhythmic guitar lines, but that's not like the critical component of gent really. Like it's more of a sound than a like a compositional style.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I guess in some ways those rhythms are kind of genty, but not really. Yeah. But that's an observation a lot of people have made.
If you're gonna call this gent, you would have to call like all math rock gent. You'd have to call like Don Caballero gent. You'd have to call
Right.
Toe gent. But that makes no sense.
Right. Yeah,
So-
I agree.
Yeah, if you scroll
totally
down
agree.
and look at some of these reviews, which you definitely shouldn't because we have a bad habit of doing that on this show, but
Too
yeah,
late.
he's going to do it anyway. You will see people will definitely compare them to like people will find all sorts of comparisons. I think someone compared them to Meshuggah as like that was like an element of the music or something like that.
I don't agree. I don't know.
don't
I,
get-
I
I
haven't.
don't agree.
I
at
haven't
all.
spent like an enormous amount of time with this thing. I really like it, so I will spend more time with it in the future.
This is like an art, not,
But I don't
or
hear that.
this is like a poppy rock album for gent kids. I feel like that like a lot of people found it through that avenue. So I don't know if that has something to do with it, but
Yeah, I think that's like a general. That's like a general problem. I think like the scene that a band becomes popular out of is like kind of sometimes described as the genre, even if it doesn't really
Yeah.
make sense.
Bent Knee's
So,
another
like-
We've talked about that
example.
with Bent Knee.
Yeah, exactly.
Ben Knee's an example. Yeah, I wasn't aware of the history of this album in terms of like the scene that it emerged out of, but it sounds like this is also an example.
Their first EP came out shortly after, I think, or shortly before Tall Poppy Syndrome. The Lepers had been a band for a while, but of course they were a backing band. But they came about at the same time. I really don't know if there's much of an influence. It would be more interesting to me if those two bands hadn't heard each other when they started writing music. That'd been way more interesting to me, and I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case. But again, yeah, I don't know. The only reason I'm harping on this so much is I see the comparison, and outside of the vocals, I don't see as much comparison between the two. Like this music is a little more straightforward, and it's like in this really nice, like it's boxed up really nicely in each track. I don't know. There's like a really like pretty straightforward song structure in a lot of these, and the music's really catchy too. Like all of these songs. So that's another thing is like I think this album runs the best when you listen to it as a full piece, like all the way through. I don't think there are any like I don't think it sags at any point during the record. I think every song is great, and the pacing's really good, and the transitions are really good. But this is also an album that you can pull any of the songs out by themselves and listen to them, and they're also really good. They'll get stuck in your head for days. Like I've been singing "See Hell" for I guess years now, honestly.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's just really catchy stuff. And that's why I said I think it's a concept record, not a not a rock opera, doesn't have a story necessarily, but it seems to be dealing with themes of loss, like loss of youth, like in Howls, like he's talking about. I think he's talking about like lamenting being or getting older and stuff. I think that's kind of like a kind of like general theme of the music. And the way I like to think about it, I have no clue if this is what they were going for, but I like to think about it as though it's like an old person recounting through like stream of consciousness and all these songs, like different parts in his life when he's gone through loss or something like that. It's kind of how I like to conceptualize it, and I have a good time listening to it that way.
The last track with like that lengthy like ambient almost noise section that was really awesome way to end the album.
Yeah, it picks up. It kind of comes full circle because you've got. I think it's "Let Them See Us." It goes all the way through, and it picks up the same melody at the end. It's a really interesting way to close the album. Did you guys have a personal favorite track on here?
I would have to go. Not yet. "See Hell" was definitely awesome. Let me look at the tracks again. There was
I'd have to spend more time with it. I didn't really pay attention to the track listing while I was listening to it, to be honest.
Sea Hell was definitely a
usually
great
don't.
track.
Howl's is amazing. It's got really that's like a really mathy intro.
I think the Autumn Red I recall was really awesome.
Autumn Red's awesome, yeah.
Yeah, I think the Autumn Red is the one that I recall really catching my attention the most. But again, I haven't spent as much time with this album as I planned to because I thought it was really awesome, and it's definitely one that'll be in my rotation.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys liked it.
So,
also, how about that like breakdown in the middle of the title track? Like really like heavily distorted breakdown. You know what I'm talking about? He says the blood is in your eyes, and it goes do do do. It just like plays.
I don't
for, like,
remember
30
that.
seconds.
I do remember is it the Autumn Red that has like a pretty like a really really mathy section, like a very very complicated instrumental section? It's like a track in like the middle of the track listing. It might have been the Autumn Red. What track was that? That it might have been
Autumn Red comes after Howls. I think it's Owls.
Maybe.
Da, 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 do, 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 do.
Yeah, it must have been that. It was like towards the middle.
Yeah, Howls.
That was awesome.
That song is great. And that's the cool thing about this music. It's all really bright and kind of happy on the surface, but the lyrics are just devastating if you pay attention to them. I know James doesn't pay attention to them, but if you pay attention to the lyrics, they're just absolutely devastating.
I pay attention,
But like
to
in
lyrics,
kind of an uplifting way.
So far,
Yeah.
I've definitely the vocal melodies have like overshadowed the lyrics for me listening to this. But I'm sure as I spend more time with it, I'll pay more attention to the lyrics.
This is an Icelandic band, right?
They are.
That always amazes me how well artists are able to write in English who don't speak English natively.
His lyrics are poetic, man. I think he might have a better grasp of the English language than I do. It's pretty weird. At least you're writing better poetry.
It's a low bar.
Well, yeah, but still, it makes me feel even worse.
Yeah, Jake, you have a 2,000 word vocabulary.
I think so. Michael Ackerfeld has a great one too. Not being a native.
Yeah, he does. I love Mike's vocals or lyrics. I've had a lot of time to digest those.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a cool one. Yeah, this is a band. Like a lot of the comments in like the Shoutbox on the RYM page are talking about how like they don't understand how this band's not bigger, and I definitely felt that. Like it's weird that this band doesn't have like some. There are a lot of these bands, like these like kind of melodic bands that get lumped into the kind of prog sphere that like I feel like just that association has killed so many bands that should be more popular. Like Gazpacho is one I always think of. Like whenever I listen to them, I'm like, this band is great and like super accessible. Like I always feel like this band should be like have a mainstream following outside of the prog scene, but they don't. And this Agent Fresco was another one.
Is this band still making music? This came out in 2015. It looks like it's their last release.
I don't know what they're doing. They had the previous album in 2010, and then they went another 5 years before making an album. So that might just be normal for them. But it has been 7 years, really. Almost 7 years. It mustn't
be like even close to a full-time thing for the members.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
I feel like it should, though. Like, if this band toured and got some exposure, I think that they could definitely get a lot of attention.
Yeah.
So
they've toured with a lot of big names in the prog rock, prog metal scene as like a support act opener. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to explain it. I mean, yeah, maybe it's like a side thing for them, and they just don't promote it as much. Maybe that could have something to do with it. But even this album, though, you'd think would have more of a following.
I think if you get popular in the prog scene, it's just too niche, and it gets no mainstream or critical recognition, so it's really hard to emerge out of that. I would want to, honestly, if I was in a band, I would want to emerge out of that label because it keeps bands down. Like I love prog rock; it's like my favorite genre, but it fucking keeps bands down getting that tag. Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't like that.
Yeah. Well,
do you think there's actually like a causal relationship there?
I think there's at least some kind of one.
I wonder how that.
It's a
work.
niche that mainstream critics pay no attention, or even a lot of non-mainstream critics pay no attention to.
No, but is there an intention of not of ignoring stuff that falls under the progressive umbrella?
maybe 50-50.
Like I don't see how the getting that tag could hide something.
I think it's just like it becomes part of a particular musical niche and scene that is not monitored by a good amount of, more mainstream music publications, critics, websites, things like promoters.
But how would something get picked up by the mainstream critics in the first place?
I mean, I don't know.
They're starting from zero, right? So like, how would getting tagged as one thing,
like the people who they associate
contribute
with,
to it being
the people who they associate with, and the people who eventually hear the music, and the following and the social circle that they develop around the music.
The record label you're on might have something to do with it.
Like who's coming to the shows, who's listening to it, who's streaming it, who's buying it on Bandcamp. Is it prog rock fans or is it someone else? And then like your audience eventually blossoms out of who's doing that. And if
no,
the
I understand,
scene
but
that
like
ends up
no one's doing
your
it from the start.
A prog scene, then a lot of people aren't going to pay attention to it. Unfortunately, I don't feel like what I'm saying is particularly complicated or controversial.
No, it does. I think it's a chicken and the egg thing. I don't think that like if no one's paying attention to it at all in the first place, and then the progressive fan base picks it up, I don't see how that would make it worse.
The quote Anthony had
for a band.
About Arion being what people who hate prog rock think prog rock is. That's
people who either don't really know a lot about prog rock or don't listen to it think it all is fucking Arion and lyrics about fucking spaceships.
Well,
that's what people think, dude.
No, I know, but
it's all transitive.
I just don't see how, like, again, if you're starting from no fans, then I don't see how it would stop.
I already explained what I meant.
Jim gets hung up on.
I still don't get it.
The craziest stuff sometimes. But think about this. If you're on Spotify, because a lot of people listen through streaming services now, right? I mean, that's kind of how the world works. If I listen to The Congregation, and this has happened many times, and I think this is how I discovered this band. I'm pretty sure I was listening to The Congregation. I listened to the whole album, then it ended, and then like the next track, maybe a Lepers track. Then after that, it was Dark Water by this band, and it came up there. I don't think. I mean, if you're listening to pop music, I mean, this is not going to show up. But if you're listening to prog metal from the 2010s, like this is going to show up on like Pandora, Spotify, radio, whatever.
That's a good point.
It's like the suggestion. And
algorithms.
So the discoverability.
I don't use streaming services, but algorithms on these platforms are enormously important as to how a band gets discovered too. And the algorithm could develop around people who listen to prog. So that's a really good point too.
Yeah, and I mean, that probably represents just how it happens organically, like in the world too. You have friends who listen to stuff, and like if they don't listen to prog rock, they probably haven't heard this. But I've listened to a bunch of prog rock and prog metal and happen to have heard it and discovered it that way. It's even possible that I found it on like a prog rock website or something that I was like Prog Report or something. I can't remember exactly. It's all about
that's all perfectly plausible. My only hang up here is like I don't think that's the reason that mainstream critics don't pick it up. Like I don't think they would have picked it up in the first place.
There doesn't have to be one reason.
It's not because it was picked up by a particular audience. It's
not conscious.
It just
it's
seems
the way
like
that it evolved organically. It evolved in a space that is not within the purview of mainstream music journalism. I don't feel like this is a very complex point.
No, but I don't think they would have found it in the first place. That's my only point.
Who wouldn't have found it in the first place?
Mainstream critics.
They might have if different people would have gotten into it.
You mean if they had gotten into it?
If people who they pay attention to had gotten into it. They don't pay attention to the progressive rock scene.
No, right, but like
you're overthinking this.
Is it because the progressive rock scene got into it that other people didn't get into it?
To some degree, yes, because that's a scene that is dismissed.
Prog rock is not cool. Prog rock is not cool. It's just not a cool genre.
Yeah,
it's not a cool genre of music.
Yeah.
People think that it's
no,
Dream
it
Theater.
definitely isn't. I just yeah. I guess I kind of see it. Yeah.
That doesn't have to be the only reason why. I mean, there can be all
yeah,
sorts
it's
of
not
other reasons.
100%, but it's a factor. I would
Yeah.
speculate. I don't have data, but I mean, I've been a fan of prog rock the vast majority of my life. I love it a lot, so I know what cultural associations are around it, and it's fucking not cool. There's like, I'm part of various other like sort of niche subcultures in my own interests that have nothing to do with music, and people in those niche subcultures don't give a fuck about prog rock either. It's not cool. It's not like
no. It's definitely not cool. I totally get that. Definitely not cool. I just think there's more to it.
There is more to
yeah,
it.
Like,
I wasn't saying it's 100%.
Yeah. Like I don't know. I think somewhat challenging music is always going to be maligned. Not even maligned, but ignored, just because most people just aren't interested in a certain level of depth in music, and that's fine. That is what it is. I'm not making like a.
But this isn't
moral
particularly
claim
challenging.
here.
Music,
I don't
think.
No, it's not.
But it's got the tag, and I think people go, "Oh, okay. Well, I'm not gonna listen to
like
that."
and
yeah,
like this album, this Agent Fresco album, it's not gonna like hit the top of the charts in 2022 or anything, obviously. But
did well in Iceland. They got won awards in Iceland.
Well, no one lives there.
500,000 people.
It's less than that. More people live in Wyoming than live in Iceland.
I don't think that's right.
It's right.
That's true.
300,000
right.
in Iceland.
Oh,
damn.
wow.
That's a little country.
Yeah. Anyway, so this Agent Fresco album would not like hit the top of the charts, but it's melodic, vocal-driven music with hooks, so it could get some mainstream attention. Gazpacho is another band, as I've said, that is similar, and I feel like could as well. Like, there are bands that are more complex than this that are more popular. Like, think about Radiohead. Like,
Tool.
Radiohead has made music
Tool.
that's 1,000 times more. Tool. Bands like that have made music that's 1,000 times more complicated than this. Think about Coheed and Cambria. They're a band that have broken out of that prog rock tag. Like, that stuff is probably even more prog rock than Agent Fresco is.
I agree.
But like, they sort of got even though Coheed and Cambria are a progressive rock band, they got popular in a different scene, which I think is part of why they got big. They got big in like the emo post-hardcore scene. And that was a scene that had a lot of cultural cachet in the early 2000s. So, like, it's a factor as to what bands get attention in the mainstream.
Yeah, a factor, yes. I would hypothesize it's a pretty insignificant factor because there's just so much more that goes into whether or not a band is received in the first place. Like, you're competing in a sea of artists that are all after the same thing, and only so many of them are going to get picked up. I'm sure the tag has something to do with that, but I don't think I would be surprised if it was that much.
Think about it this way. So you've listened to, I would say, very few releases from this year, right? 2022 so far.
Yeah, I don't listen to new music.
Oh, okay. I'll ask you again in 30 years.
But you're going to state what people like. You're going to state what new music is like, even though you don't listen.
Well, no. So what I'm asking is, like, you haven't listened to very many albums to have come out in 2022, right? But you've listened to a few of them, right?
Yes.
Which ones have you listened to? Like,
in 2022.
The Flower Kings? Did you listen to the Flower Kings album?
Yeah, I listened to Flower Kings.
Right. So you haven't listened to a lot of music, but you listen to a band you know really well.
Sure.
Like, you have a background with. Like, something that
What's
resonates with you that would be on your radar. I think that's what's happening here with most people, like, in the mainstream. Like, this just isn't going to show up for them. And I understand what you're saying. It wouldn't have shown up for them anyway.
Yeah, sure. That's exactly. That's my whole point.
No, it's my whole point.
No, it's my whole point. Like, if no one's heard the band before, then what difference does it make whether someone, like, how
That's
a person
not what Jake
tags it?
said. He didn't say no one's heard the band before. He said the people who are hearing the bands are not within the sphere of influence of other people who have heard the band. People who have influence on the music industry and music journalism are in a different. There's no Venn diagram overlap with the people who happen to get into this band.
This album has 696 ratings. All of those people are extremely weird. We're talking about this on our podcast, and we're all really weird. Like, I'm just saying, that's the audience for this. For some reason, it shouldn't necessarily be yeah, it's really catchy and poppy and like doesn't always make sense. And I think that it's associated with Leprous and even Haken for some reason. Like, you can listen to Haken radio and this stuff will show up.
So Anaal Nathrakh are a band that are very well respected and are very popular in extreme metal circles. They're not going to get on the radio because they're Anaal Nathrakh. It's not music that would ever get on the radio. It has no ability to appeal to a mainstream audience. So it's both factors in that case. The music wouldn't work, and also there's no overlap between mainstream music journalism and fucking Anaal Nathrakh. But in the case of Agent Fresco, the music could potentially have some mainstream appeal, but it's also held back by the fact that it's part of a scene that has no mainstream appeal.
Yeah. It's not like they're going to be pumping out top 40 like hits or anything like that, but you think the record sales would be a lot better just based on the kind of music it is.
I tend to think if it coulda, it woulda. But maybe I'm wrong.
There's all sorts of music people find like generations later, and they're like, yeah, it didn't have much of a following at first, but then people listen to it 10 years later and like, this was some of the greatest music ever.
Yeah,
it's just like
bands.
A lot of cultural factors that come into play. Like the sociology of music's really interesting, and like just like explaining why certain like artists are successful. A lot of it's fortuitous like chance, but it's also depends on what's popular at the time.
That's how it is with art. Like, the zeitgeist that it emerges from depends on how it's received. Fucking when Moby Dick was published in the 1850s, no one gave a fuck about it. And it wasn't until, modernist literary taste became emergent in the 20th century that people looked back on it and declared it a masterpiece. That's a famous example. But, I mean, it's part of how art is received.
Yep.
Well, fair enough.
It's also kind of like, I think you're more personally attached to the music conversation because you're in a band that are making your first album right now, so it's more on your mind. So I get it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm thinking about it in that context. Like, I doubt it's the way that we would get tagged that would hold us back from becoming popular.
Depends on the kind of music you're playing.
It's because of the music we're playing.
I know, and in the case of Agent Fresco, the music that they're playing could become popular. I feel like I'm repeating myself.
This is at least a hypothetical explanation. Like, it makes sense. Like,
even
if that weren't the case in here, like, it could explain it. Like, that's all. That's all. Like Anthony's point. That's all it really needs to say is it could be the main factor, even if it isn't. But yeah,
I mean, I would say definitively
it
that
could
it is
be,
a factor.
Yeah.
The fact that they're from Iceland,
but it could
be part of it too. It's fucking geographically isolated.
Well, they don't put out albums, but every 5 years, and
they're not that active. Yeah, there are a lot of factors. So like, it's not some binary. Yeah.
But they might not be active because they can't make money from it. Like, they just can't. They don't have the time for it. So I mean, we don't know. We don't really know.
Well, I bought this on Bandcamp, and you motherfuckers didn't. So I'm helping them out.
Yeah, they got like.
How do you know I didn't buy it on
Bandcamp? Yeah, they got like 8 cents out of me on Spotify.
Fuck Spotify.
Better than me pirating it.
I need to say fuck Spotify on every episode. I need to make sure that gets in there.
Okay, well, let's move on here to
Jim wants the podcast to get huge on Spotify, so he doesn't. He's gonna cut out me saying that.
I don't know. I think Spotify's great, dude. You're not gonna turn the clock back on streaming services. It's never gonna happen.
As a poor college kid, that's the only way I could listen to music. I would have been able to listen to nothing.
Music streaming is not for me, but I'm not against it. There are
good arguments. It's better. There are good arguments. It's better for musicians, even still. But that's a different.
It's not the best possible world for them by a long shot, I would say, but it's probably better than some circumstances. Like there are definitely models that they may not be able to work, but like there are hypothetical models that would benefit artists way greater than streaming services. But that's where we are. it's cheap, and I don't have money to spend on. I like collecting vinyl, but I don't have money to spend on a bunch of them.
Yeah. Music
Bandcamp
production
is
is
fucking
also
awesome.
much cheaper.
Bandcamp
I love
is the
Bandcamp.
best platform for artists by far. So always
Yeah.
buy and listen to shit on Bandcamp when it's
Yeah.
on there.
Yeah, I just bought that Monobody record.
That is the most artist friendly platform there is. Consensus that's the case. So fuck Spotify, go Bandcamp. That's my message.
All right, on to number 3. We've got Alphaville by Imperial Triumphant. This is my pick for today. I'm surprised you hadn't heard this, Anthony.
It was on my radar.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, like a avant metal album from 2020. I hadn't heard of it. I hadn't heard of these guys until probably like 6 months ago.
This album
Poor
blew up in
sax player
2020.
turned me on to
Got a
this.
lot Fantano reviews.
Yeah,
got a lot of
it's
attention.
yeah, it was high. It's highly rated on Rate Your Music too. I mean, it's fucking really really good. It's no surprise. Yeah, it's really really good. So I know you mentioned you thought this has a huge Decibel Omega influence.
There is a
I have
huge
no
Decibel
context
Omega
there.
influence.
Yeah.
Their first album, Abominaventum, the first Imperial Triumphant album, is like straight up Decibel Omega, just like copycatting, like straight up. They developed their own sound more in the later material, but Decibel Omega is still the main influence on this band, by far. Jake mentioned Voivod too, and there's definitely a lot of that on here. Like that intro of Excelsior is straight Voivod.
Yeah.
Like that could be a Voivod.
Yeah,
could be a Voivod track. That could be straight out off of like Nothing Face. Which I mean, me comparing this to other bands, like that's fine. Like bands have their influences. I don't mind bands like wearing their influences on their sleeve. I don't have a problem with that. This album is like, it's pretty legitimately weird. Their previous one, their one from 2018, Via Luxury, was more avant-garde than this one. That Via Luxury was crazy, but this one is pretty nuts. It's pretty nuts. So I've been telling Jim to listen to Decibel Omega for like years and years and years, and he won't do it because he's just too based, I think. So
That's exactly right.
He'll listen to it in about 18 years. I did that with the Contortionist a long time ago.
Give me a couple more decades, I'll get on top of it.
Yeah, he's like, I don't know why I never listened to this sooner. I'm like, I don't know.
Any kind of avant-garde.
I don't know. I've been asking myself that for years.
Any kind of avant-garde leaning black metal post post to 2010 are gonna owe a lot to Decibel Omega. So it's not an insult me saying that. They're the big wig in that style. So
yeah, it's so funny hearing that's like such an obvious influence on them, having never heard that music before. Because like when I hear this, I hear tons of Toby Driver influence.
Oh, for
tons
sure.
of I hear so much Toby Driver in this, both Maudlin of the Well and KO Dot.
And Trace Bruins produced it, and I definitely hear Bungle too.
That's right. I didn't hear that the first time, but then when Jake mentioned that Spruance produced this, I definitely heard some of that.
Zorn's metal,
fucking cool. He produced this.
Zorn's metal albums, like his the stuff he's been doing in the past couple of years, which you guys also haven't heard this stuff, but the stuff he's been doing in the past couple of years, like the Simulacra trio and his other trio with Matt Hollenberg. Matt Hollenberg is this guitarist who Zorn works with very extensively now for like his heavier stuff. Huge amount of that on here. Definitely a Zorn influence on here. And again, I'm not insulting it by calling out the influences. It's not a bad thing. Some people like originality is not something that I'm particularly concerned with in music. But it is kind of original. Like
we've all talked about that.
Earlier Imperial Triumphant is like not terribly original. I would say that Alphaville is like. I do think a lot of people, and I think honestly you bros might be included among them. And I'm not insulting you by saying that. I think because this album kind of blew up, because Alphaville kind of blew up, I think a lot of people are hearing it and like thinking it's like the craziest thing ever. Whereas like it's like
I thought this was very
it's definitely not like out of the
approachable and
blue.
accessible.
Yeah, I think
I thought this was very approachable and accessible avant metal. Like I haven't listened to a whole bunch of avant-garde metal. Like I listened to that Shub Niggurath album, like the I don't even know how to say it in French.
Les Morts Vont Vite. That's like a Zool album.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That shit is difficult.
That shit's heavy.
This album sounds really good, and it's
it does.
I don't know. I'm really drawn to like the kind of progressive, like weird technical like switches and like genre bending and stuff. So it was much easier for me to digest, I think. But I thought that from the avant metal and rock that I've heard, I thought this was much easier to stomach. Like the Maudlin of the Well stuff is downright difficult to listen to at times. I think even the KO dot is kind of difficult to listen to at times. But I thought this was just not basic or anything like that. But it's really technical.
Deathspell Omega, by the way, is also a band that influenced Toby Driver. He said that himself. So
wow,
it's a spider web. Influences are a spider web. It's not a linear line. So Alphaville, this thing was fucking awesome. I loved it. So I nothing I've said about it is a criticism.
Yeah, I love this shit too. I feel bad. I feel like we haven't really talked about the music itself at this point, but we've only been talking about the influences. But I absolutely love this album. The guitar lines are really cool. They do these like big cascading single note, like really like crunchy picked lines, but also very distorted. So it's not like a bunch of like chunky heavy riffs. It's these like I said, sort of cascading lines.
Yeah, it's like a
really
wave.
Sharp.
It's like it's like a flow, sort of, which
yeah,
is very
they're
black.
They're very sharp. Yeah.
There's one moment
absolutely.
on this album where he's just like, I don't know, he's like screaming or whatever, and the guitar is just like, it's almost like playing a scale, just like descending throughout the entire, and it just like extends. You know what do you know what I'm talking about? It's like and just like keeps going like through the whole, and there's like this rhythm playing underneath. It's really interesting. I can't remember.
I just listened to this like an hour before we started recording, so I know the part you're talking about.
The song structures.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was like, yo, this is so cool.
The song structures, I think, are the thing that's most experimental. Like if you try to like follow the way that the songs are structured, like the way that the movements connect to each other, the way that the verses like are related to each other, it's insanely unorthodox and like labyrinthine and really hard to follow in a way that's really, really fun and awesome.
Yeah, it still keeps you guessing part of it musically. Like I don't know what to expect every single time. That's something that somebody I saw somebody in like one of the like on one of the forums here like talking about, you know, something that I don't think this is a be all end all in music or in art, but like sometimes I think a good quality of art is when it keeps you guessing. Like you don't know what to expect next. Like and then it works. Like that's I definitely think that's what this album is doing. Like there's just twists and turns that I was just like, it was just like throw me back in my chair. I was like, holy shit! Like I wouldn't expect him to go that direction, and they would, and it worked really well. And it keeps it interesting for my short attention span.
Yeah, I mean, great example in track 2, Excelsior, when they go to that. It sounds like it's probably like some kind of field recording where there's like there's someone speaking over a loudspeaker, and it sounds like people are in transit around them. And there's music on top of that too. It's like it sounds like it's a horn or like some kind of woodwind almost going over top of this like field recording. Do you remember this part?
Yeah, it's super weird. And Atomic Age
very
is full
weird.
of weird stuff like that too.
Yeah.
I think like they have a song called Metropolis on Via Luxury, and Jim, have you not heard their other 3 albums yet?
No, I haven't heard the other records.
Via Luxury, which again I was like, in my opinion was a pretty crazy album. Definitely more on the avant-garde side of stuff than Alphaville was. They have a song called Metropolis on here, and then obviously the artwork and a lot of the themes on Alphaville seem inspired by Metropolis, that Fritz Lang film, which I've never seen, to my shame. So that it seems like that's almost like this
the 1920s film.
Yeah, it seems like it's like this, almost like this continuity between the discography. That Fritz Lang film, like the cover of Alphaville, is like very much an homage to that film.
Yeah, I love the cover on this record. I love that intricate line work. Very, very cool stuff. Yeah, I dig this band, man. I just missed them in Denver. I saw they were just through here. I wish I would have gone.
Yeah, that would
I
have been
didn't know-
awesome.
I
I
didn't
saw
know they were
they were
here.
touring.
This would be a cool band to see live.
What made you listen to this? So hard to get you to listen to anything.
Yeah, I know this. Kapora sax player sent me the album.
Oh, okay.
Probably like 6 months ago. Yeah.
And you actually listened to it?
I did. I listened to it that very
Cringe.
day. In fact. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
Should have
that's
ignored
gross,
it.
dude.
Yeah, now we have to talk about it.
Actually listening to
Should've
music,
ignored
that's so lame. It's just cringe beyond reason.
It's funny too because I actually listen to so much shit, but in the context of this podcast, I don't listen to music.
Yeah, compared to
Anthony's got us dwarfed by a great bit.
Yeah.
I will say.
Is that true?
It falls off significantly after that. I mean, based on the number of your ratings you have on Rate Your Music, I probably listened to more than what I've rated on Rate Your Music, but it's probably close. I would say.
I listened to an outrage.
My listening habits have slowed down like crazy too. I was listening to so much more music before I went back to school.
Yeah. I
Oh my
passed
God.
James
Yeah.
on
Oh.
ratings recently, but yeah, when I was in school, man, it was like streamlined. Like I just wanted to listen to like the same kind of stuff over and over.
It's
again.
not even that. I don't have as much time to listen as I did when I was working because I had 8 hours a day of work where I was listening to music constantly. Now I'm in classes and shit, and I can't.
Do you have music on when you're doing like work, like schoolwork on your own?
Yeah. If I'm doing projects, I listen to music.
Yeah.
So that's, but then like I'm catching up on shit to listen to for this ridiculous podcast.
Well, James can also play music too, so that's another thing.
Cringe.
So.
Making music is even worse than listening to it.
Wait until you hear the Kapora album. You will.
I can't wait.
Those words.
I have no doubt.
Yeah. Anyway, why don't we rank these things?
Let's do it.
All right.
What say you?
All right, Big
I
Jake.
usually go first. I can do that, or we can mix it up here a little
I
bit.
thought Big Jake.
I've got some
normally went
stats
first.
too after that. Yeah, I can go first.
I always go last.
Do it. You should go first. Do it.
Fuck off.
Yeah, I'm thinking-
No, I'm going last. I haven't even listened to
All
these
right.
albums, and I'm still gonna rank them.
You didn't even listen to Anaal and Nathrakh.
I've never heard an all.
That was it was a raw beef. It was a raw beef for you too. You still haven't heard them, yeah.
I've never heard any albums. I've been faking it.
Even the Gornoy stuff. Anyway, all right.
Oh,
No,
Gornoy.
actually, I only listen to
Gornoys is
Gore
actually
Noise.
the only
I
music
only
I
listen
listen
to
to.
Gore Noise.
Are you
I've heard
Anna Loves
Benag-
You on Rate Your Music?
Swallow. What was it? Swallow mucus diarrhea. Dude, I was geeking at that shit. I was just like sitting at work, like the phone's ringing.
You
I have
asked
to
for
like,
some
I have to
French
like
grindcore,
stop.
so I had to find some.
I'm like looking
I had
at
to find some
swallow
French
mucus
grindcore.
diarrhea on my phone and geeking, and then I have to like stop laughing to pick up the phone.
Oh God! Oh, the album cover. Why?
It's a split between swallow mucus diarrhea and gangrene discharge.
It's a nice collab.
Drown the victim. What was it? Drown the victim.
It's Bobby. This is Bobby Maggard. This is urinary tract
Bobby
infection
Maggard,
from severe pus clots.
Like 90% of all fucking gore noise is Bobby Maggard.
Oh my fuck! It
Some
really
dude
is.
in Arkansas.
Holy shit!
Some dude in the middle of nowhere, Arkansas, is making like the vast. I already said this on the chat a long time ago.
I don't read the chat.
You were responding
James doesn't
to
pay
it.
attention to
I was
anything
talking
anyone
to you
says. He's
about it.
extremely based.
He has
I didn't read it. I didn't read it.
regurgitated turd. Remember?
Feculent fetus flattener.
There's one called like blowjob. There's one that starts with blowjob. That was funny.
Epidural hematoma.
Blowjob Olympics.
Yeah. This dude is just
Oh,
hanging out in
God.
Russellville, Arkansas, like just cranking out like 2 Gore Noise albums a
Ooh.
day.
What about minced
Bat-
genital meat pie?
Bowel topsy. Good God.
Blowjob Olympics.
Obsessed
so
with
good.
facial injuries.
Oh, dude, I'm not. Okay,
This
never
guy,
mind. I gotta stop looking at these.
he has like
I just saw one that was.
it's like 200 different bands that he has.
What the fuck? What the fuck is this?
It's an acronym for something. All the Gore Noise dudes like write out there if they have like a long ass name, they'll like abbreviate it with X's between the letters. So it's like some kind of fucking acronym for some sentence.
This album doesn't even have a track listing.
Look who rated them.
Look at the logo. Look at the band logo.
Anna loves you. There she is. 10,000 ratings, almost all of which are below a 3.
3,000.
The vast majority of which
ratings.
are below a 2.
She's got some normal music in like the 4.5 and 5s. I'm pretty sure.
Let's see
Wasn't the
here.
Peste Noire debut one of her 1.5s?
It
Yes,
was. That was
I think that's one of the 5s.
It's 5 out of 5. Yeah.
Yep. There she blows.
It's a fucking awesome album. It is a 5. I would pick it for one of these, but obviously I can't do that.
I think we got off track there, and we're talking about various pseudonyms for Bobby
This has
Haggard.
happened like the last.
Yeah.
I've edited a lot of episodes recently. This happened like the last 4 or 5 episodes.
We're all
We end
fixating
up on
on,
Anna
gore
Loves You.
noise.
We end up on Anna Loves You's Rate Your Music page every single episode.
Recycling content for all the devoted Butternotes podcast fans.
Oh, God.
All right, let's hear the ranking of every
All
single
right.
one of Bobby Maggard's projects, Jake. We're gonna have to get comfortable
All right.
for this one.
I got them all written down here. All right, yeah. So let's rank these things. 3 and 2 are really close. I would probably go with Alphaville at 3, Codex Necro at 2, and definitely would go with Destrier at 1. Destrier is one of my favorite albums ever, I would say.
Cool.
Okay, I'll go. 3 to 1, Destrier, Anaal, Nathrakh, Imperial, Triumphant.
3 to 1 for me. All these are insanely solid, but 3 would definitely be Imperial Triumphant, which is no slight on it. 2 and 1, like honestly, like I think that the Codex Necro and Destrier are 2 albums that like do what they want to do pretty flawlessly, but they're so different and they evoke entirely different emotions in me. So it's like it feels fucking stupid to rank them, which is why I'm not always into rankings. So I'll just say Destrier at 2 and Codex Necro at 1, just because I'm more familiar with the Codex Necro. But that's not a ranking that should be taken
all picked
seriously.
our own albums as number 1. Yeah,
That might be a
Incredibly
first.
What?
That might
Be a first. Have we? That might be a first where
Well, I've got the stats here.
no two have agreed on number 1.
I guess, but I mean, again, they're interchangeable. They're albums that I think are like incredibly spot on in what they want to do artistically, but they just want to do different things. So trying to rank.
Yeah, I
stuff
have
like
all
that
3 of
doesn't
these.
make sense.
Yeah, I have all 3 of them rated
Ah.
the same. This appeals to me the most. Imperial
Now
Triumphant.
we did this in Raw Beef 9. James, you picked Hail to
Oh.
England over Max and Match and Juicy Fruit, and then Anthony picked Max and Match, Juicy Fruit, Hail to England, and I picked Juicy Fruit, Max and Match, Hail to England. So we all picked our own in Raw
That
Beef
was a
9.
really
So it's only
weird
the
second
fact
combination
that
of albums.
the fact that none of you agreed upon Manowar being the best of that combo is telling.
There's a comment. There's a comment in the Raw Beef 10 where James is like, "How do you like this album cover?" It's like Rick James standing there, and Anthony's like, "Jim has this thing for men in leather from the '80s."
You're
I played that
goddamn
back a
right.
few times. That was great.
You're goddamn right. I do.
Who doesn't?
All right, so let me do some quick stats here. I did. There hasn't been really much of a change, but just because I know
More
James is
American albums.
terribly concerned if he's winning. Yeah, all the American albums, and let James know he's still winning. Yeah, James, you're in front right now with the 3.67.
That's why I picked this shit. I don't even listen to most of them. I just look at stuff that's going to have a higher rating than what you guys pick.
Based.
I believe that because you're dead on with a lot of your ratings. You have a 3.68, 6.7, 6.3, 6.6. Like, yeah, you're pretty close. That makes sense.
It's purely calculation.
I don't doubt that at all.
Yeah.
You're just the better gamer. 3 point. Anthony's got a 3.61, and then I'm still bringing up the rear with a 3.55. Yeah, the United States is still leading with 14, with the UK with 7, and the Netherlands with 2, and there's a bunch with 1, which I won't read all the way through, but we did add Iceland to the list. And then nothing changed for the highest rated albums, but the lowest rated albums. The Way Is Red broke the 3-way tie for 4th place, and is now on its own in 4th place. So Folia and the Flesh Prevails are both tied for 6th right now.
Well, 7 people on Earth have heard Folia, and we're 3 of them. So
it's 5. I'm pretty sure,
and three of them are in Folia.
I think
so
the three
one
of
other
us might
person
be
has
the
heard it,
only
and it's
people. I think,
and it's the beard kid guy is the 7th person who's heard Folia.
Did the beard kid guy rate Folia? Seriously?
I don't think so. Actually,
No, I don't
that would be
think so.
too amazing.
I did find another obscure Dutch prog rock band that I thought about picking, but I didn't want to do the memes. I actually like it.
Sounds
but,
based.
I didn't do it. Yeah. This is what music is about.
Is this the beard kid guy?
Yeah, it is.
That's the beard kid guy, yeah.
Perhaps it's not cool enough for the beard
Oh
kids
yeah,
here.
beard kids. Yeah, there he is.
This guy's a legend.
This dude's listened to a fuckload of music too.
He's only rated 262
Snagglepuss.
albums.
Oh wait, no, you're right. I'm thinking of somebody else.
You're thinking of Anna Loves You.
You're right.
Are you thinking of that guy that posted that like ridiculously long, like vitriolic review, like 1-star review of The Cult Is Alive by Darkthrone? You might be thinking of that guy.
I might be thinking of that guy.
That guy is.
It's possible. There are 5 people who have heard Folia.
Well, I don't know what happened to them.
Plus the members of Folia. There are 7 members of Folia, so 12 people on Earth have heard Folia.
That math makes sense.
I'm not going to argue with it.
Well then, that seems like the end of Raw Beef 12. Interesting episode here. Got off on some tangents. Yeah, got off on some tangents.
Had a weird
between
argument
gore
with Jim.
noise and the sociology of music.
We had a completely neurotic argument in the middle of there for no reason.
Well, that's how it works with you, Perez.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, probably. Okay, until next time, Butternotes Podcast listeners. Goodbye.